Since COVID-19 hit in mid-March, my husband and I have been home alone with our two kids, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 3 months straight. And we tend to be a little bit intense, I admit, right? So during this time, we created a curriculum which is part of what we call Freeman Academy. And in the process, we also became much more conscious of just how toxic school environments can be for Black kids. So in this episode, I want to discuss how stereotypes, whitewashed curricula, and discipline in schools have all contributed to the negative outcomes and experiences that Black students face. And in Sweeter the Juice fashion, I'm also going to do something I haven't done yet. I'm going to showcase a snippet of an interview with 3 amazing Black moms who have created a community to support their kids who are also learning while Black. So stay tuned, because I got the juice. Hey Blackberries, welcome back to another episode of Sweeter the Juice. Let me just get right into it. Everything happening right now is connected. There is an interlocking relationship between police brutality that we've been protesting against, anti-Blackness, and also what's gone wrong with the school system. Yes, teachers are underpaid, schools are underfunded, the curriculum is out of date and straight up racist in some cases, and that's not even to mention what's directly happening specifically to Black kids. Have you ever heard of the phrase school to prison pipeline? Well, this refers to the policies and practices that are directly and indirectly pushing Black students and other students of color out of school and on a pathway to prison. Now, how does this prison pipeline work, you ask? Well, it works through the failure to provide children with a quality education and through disciplinary practices that tend to be applied much more harshly to Black students. Suspensions and expulsions, for example. Did you know that Black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than white students? And these suspensions matter because one suspension, let's say in 9th grade, doubles the likelihood that students will drop out eventually. And without an education and with fewer educational and employment options, we know exactly where they're more likely to go. 70% of all inmates are illiterate, which really suggests how important learning these basic skills are. It also tells us just how poorly prepared the economy is to absorb low-skilled and low-educated workers. Now, these numbers are disturbing, especially because we aren't just talking about 9th graders. Black preschool children are 3.6 times more likely than white children to receive 1 or more out-of-school suspensions. So not even the babies are safe. I mean, really, is there not a better way to handle a 3-year-old's tantrum? We've already seen cases in the media of young Black children being arrested or handcuffed for having a tantrum. But in no other place in the world does this happen except in the US, the country with the largest number of humans living warehoused in prisons. And because of America's obsession with incarceration and law enforcement, schools and districts are actually investing more in resource officers than in guidance counselors. So while we're screaming defund the police, we also need to be screaming reform schools. Systemic racism means that racism is embedded in all major institutions. So we really need to think more broadly about what we want to come out of this moment of mobilization and protest. Now, there are a lot of people drinking the Kool-Aid instead of the juice and arguing that these statistics are what they are because Black kids are just bad. But what research shows us about systemic racism is that it's multidimensional and multifaceted. And we also know that teachers often bring their racist biases with them into the classroom. So Black kids are perceived to be older than they really are, more threatening than white students, and they're stereotyped as being troublemakers from the get-go. In an innovative experiment by the Yale Child Center, a group of preschool teachers were shown a video of kids playing, and they were told that they were in a study about how to manage troublemakers in a classroom environment. But there was no bad behavior in the video, but the teachers didn't know that. So the researchers used eye tracking and found that teachers spent most time monitoring the Black boys, expecting them to be the source of the bad behavior. And that's because to some people, Black boys are by definition bad boys. But it gets even deeper because there's another part of the study where Black and white teachers had to read a fake scenario of a bad behaving kid. They all read the same scenario except one detail. The bad behaving kid was randomly assigned to be Black for some teachers and white for others. Well, what happened? Without going into all the details, the study found that white teachers had lower expectations for black kids, so they rated bad behavior as typical when they believed that the misbehaving kid was black. On the other hand, black teachers' responses showed that they held higher expectations when the misbehaving kids were black. But how does this all relate to discipline and to this school to prison pipeline? Well, the criminalization of black people in society corresponds with and really is used to justify the low expectations for their academic performance. It's also used to justify the lack of investment in predominantly black schools. The association between crime and blackness also help explain why black kids are among the most heavily policed and punished of all groups in schools. But hold on, because much like the Black Lives Matter movement centers black women, it's important that we recognize how black girls are also punished by the same system, albeit in different ways. Black girls are 5.5 times more likely to be suspended from school than their white peers. And get this, what gets black girls suspended the most is when they act in ways that are not considered to be feminine. For being too assertive, for talking back, for chewing gum, and don't even get me started on the way that their bodies are policed through these dress code violations. This is systemic racism and sexism at work. But make no mistake about it, colorism matters too, especially for black girls. Research finds that dark-skinned black girls are much more likely to be suspended than lighter-skinned black girls. Now, interestingly enough, for black boys, differences in skin color did not significantly impact their suspension rates. But what we do know is it impacts how they're treated in the criminal justice system. But that's a different episode. Now, we have plenty of research about what's wrong with the school system. But listen, this channel isn't called Sweeter the Juice for nothing. I want to share with you just a little bit about how 3 black homeschooling moms, Gladys, Aleatha, and Rachel, formed a homeschooling group called Freedom Quilombo, an anti-racist and safe learning environment that celebrates and affirms blackness. Just listen to how they approach homeschooling and anti-racism.
What I heard Rachel and Aleatha say, right, is our bookshelves are full of books on black people. And of course, mine is the same, right? Even my personal books, right? Because that's the work I do. I do work on black people. But I think it's very important, right, that for them, and I can see this, right, that blackness is normalized, and it's normalized in a positive way, right? So it's not for, I think it's great that, when we're teaching, since it is so black focused, it won't be surprising for them if they go out into the world and they hear about black scientists and black mathematicians. They're going to think, well, of course, right? So, but all of those, and I think you really have to be strategic. It's so easy, I think, for black parents who, if you're just, sending your kid to school, you do have to do the extra work. And my parents had to do the extra work of making sure my dad would assign books by black authors that we had to read and then discuss with him. So if you're not doing all of that extra work, then blackness is not, it will not be normalized. Your kid will not think that it's normal to have black people doing all of these great things throughout the world, right? Not just in the US, but everywhere for a very long time. So I also think that is, that people have to be intentional and strategic, but along with all of these other things, to make sure that we are combating racism and combating, these notions of inferiority. If blackness is normalized and centered, then all of those other things is easier for us to challenge all of the other isms.
So that was just a small snippet. You really have to check out what all 3 moms have to say by listening to the full interview, which you can find in the description box below. And for me, after listening to that interview and reflecting on my own experiences, what really stuck out was just the sheer amount of labor, the invisible labor that black parents have to do to prepare our children and to deprogram them after being exposed to anti-blackness at every turn. In schools, this anti-blackness can take the form of racist framings of history that erase or minimize black people's contributions, tracking into lower level courses, or even unchecked racist bullying. All of this can really chip away at our children's self-esteem and inhibit them from really experiencing the full scope of their humanity. But listen, there is always a silver lining where it concerns Black people. We don't just survive, we thrive, and we look good doing it. Black communities have a legacy, a tradition of forging ahead and creating educational spaces to pursue liberation. Because what we've always known is that our liberation is inextricably tied to education, learning about who we are, and understanding inequality. And this is true across the diaspora. I mean, this reminds me of a quote from an interview that I gave with the Black Brazilian mom in Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. And she told me that she teaches her children that educação é salvação e transformação. Education is salvation and transformation. And for Black people, becoming educated about our histories is transformative because it engenders a type of self-love and love for each other, which is in and of itself a revolutionary act. It's the beginning of the type of change that fuels the movements needed for societal transformation. So that's all for this episode of Sweet of the Juice. Leave me a message about what you think about this video. And most importantly, if you want to see the entire interview with the three moms from Freedom Quilombo, and I promise you, you will love it, then click on this link below to subscribe. Until next time, live the good life, live the sweet life.